Hi, I did a time-lapse painting of one of the burning cop cars in Philly. The painting will be for sale, and anything it makes will go to the Black Lives Matter movement. This is my first attempt at like a Bob Ross-esque video where I paint and I film it and I try to narrate my process. This is not going to be like a step-by-step guide because I'm not Bob Ross. I tried like 4 times and I couldn't do it. So this is the best I can do, and it's basically narrating my process, and the film is just sped up a little bit. So the paint is acrylic. If you have any questions about anything, let me know. There is like I talk a little bit, but there's no audio, there's no music, so I did that on purpose so anyone who wants to listen to whatever can, because it's a little bit dull if you don't. But yeah, so let me know what you think. Let me know if it's helpful. Let me know if it's not. And yeah, I have a couple more videos being edited. The world's a little bit nuts, so I'm running behind. So thank you. And everyone stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.
So first, we are going to choose our horizon and vanishing point. The horizontal line is the horizon, and that pinpoint is our vanishing point. And that means that when we draw these lines, not the horizontal ones, the ones coming from that vanishing point, that sets our perspective. And if we have a grid of everything in this frame and where it can be, then we pretty much just plant structures. And so this is a really useful tool. It seems a little bit time consuming, and I don't always do it with my canvases, but I figured for this it would be helpful to see. But as you see, I'm just basically planting structures by using the perspective that is provided just by the horizon and the vanishing point. And these shapes in the landscape and the background are not super tight, obviously. They don't look like that, and they're just plotting things out. And same for this. This is just paying attention to the points on the horizon and the perspective to line up pretty much a square and turn it into a rough shape of a cop car. So now that I have that sketch and that structure, I'm just marking down the first layer of darks, and this is obviously rough. There's rough marks, there's rough brush strokes, and it's just so that I can go from the general to the specific. Sometimes even if I'm doing a full color piece, I will do this first in black and white just so I can make sure that I have the structure solid. And I tried doing a few videos Bob Ross style where it was very step by step to have a scene. And unlike him, my brain is very circular. I have to go general to specific and like so do basic shapes, basic shadows, and then once that's set for the whole composition, I can go back and refine my details. I can refine my shapes. And so you'll see it work all together slowly, but at the same time, rather than one corner being done or one mountain being done and then one tree being done. So this is the super rough darks stage, and now I'm going to erase what pencil is still lingering, except the stuff that I know I'm going to paint over, and I'm going to do some clarifying, basically just layering paint on top of paint in order to determine where the structure starts and ends and all that stuff. I'm using a little bit more of a lighter gray to mix in with the mid-tone black that I have, allowing the form of the smoke to kind of fill in. I will be exaggerating the amount of fire in this. We have a little bit of artistic freedom with this, so it will not be like a photo representation of the image that we're using for reference, but we will stick pretty close to it. So again, just layering darks and mediums and darks and mediums and sculpting out our city in the background. We won't have to go very detailed with this. Normally, this level of detail wouldn't be up to my standards, but because it's going to be behind a cloud of smoke, I'm going to allow these details to be a little bit rougher. So, building layers general to specific, jumping from corner to corner of the painting and adding layers of detail, and then stepping away from it and going to another part. There's definitely a couple reasons for this. One being, I used to have the tendency to get really stuck doing one corner, and then, by the time I got to the other corner, it completely didn't match, and I basically mess up the painting that way. Another thing that would happen if I worked that way was I would, work for 3 hours on this and then come back the next day and not be able to, or just like not match the same either dynamic colors or just the same palette, or it felt like two paintings. And so going from general to specific allows the whole piece to kind of come together the same way. I will talk about Alan Watts later, but he talks about how nature grows versus being constructed, and I've always liked that kind of simile of flowers growing all at once rather than, they don't grow one petal and then one more and then one more. So that's how my paintings work. So as we go further in detail with the painting, we can start using more contrast and bring the image kind of forward. As I've mentioned in other perspective videos, the further back the illusion of the painting is trying to set, the less contrast is in the back. The brightest brights and the darkest darks will be closest to the viewer. So we're using lights, but just a little bit, not our brightest white. And as we bring one of the brighter whites in, you'll see that I am still following those perspective guides that we drew in the beginning, but if you have an opaque, a thick or not see-through enough paint, we can sculpt the shapes around it with the paint itself. So just the same way that you can carve out shadows with dark, you can carve out shape and highlight and shapes around it with the light around it as well. And as we define the pupil shapes, we are going to do small strokes and try to capture shape as simply as we can with just light, dark, and medium, because otherwise we're going to try to do too much detail in too small of a space. A thing to think about with clouds and smoke that make it a little bit easier to comprehend and to understand why they look the way they do is when you see clouds or smoke next to, like, very black plumes surrounded by bright white, what those mean is that there's a dense cloud of whether it's smoke or condensation, and that's what's blocking the light from getting through, which makes it darker. So these big plumes of smoke surrounded by white little clouds means that there's a dense formation of matter right there, where the lighter clouds around it are expanding outward because it's hot air hitting cold air. That doesn't make it simple at all, does it? I just made it way more complicated. So just ignore me. I'm sorry for the super bright background. I've tried 3 different cameras so far, and this is still the best one, but for some reason I can't really get it to stay on a certain light value. And just going through and seeing where I should be adding brighter highlights, where I should be making the black more saturated, where I should be bringing the clouds, and adding layer by layer until it feels done. And hopefully I stop painting at that point. So right before we start the color, I just want to kind of explain. We have these patches of white and underneath the shadow, obviously, and we're going to build layer by layer, just like everything else. But one of the reasons that these explosion clouds are so captivating to us is because there's very few situations in nature that have such a giant jump in super brights with very dark blacks and when we make these clouds, we get to do that. So when I'm painting these clouds and these explosions, I make sure to have some subtle blending going on, but make sure that there's pops of yellow white right next to like a pretty rich red. In real life, that means that like there's variations of temperature billowing out, and so the white hot is mixing right next to the red. But if we blend that, then we lose that contrast, and it no longer has that explosive kind of look. So I will be adding highlights to this, but before I do, I always have to make sure that what I've done is dry, because white and red is always pink. So we're almost done, but there's a couple things that I definitely need to fix. Now that it's getting close to done, I can tell that this is very much off. This figure should be moved down here, which is why it looks so tall compared to this. So I have to move this a little bit closer. And then I erased what shows that this cop car is turned, so we'll be fixing this area that should be showing the street, and then just tightening some details. Thanks for watching. So I'm referencing the photo and seeing where the figure should be and fixing that posture and working on getting the right shape. So I mentioned now that this color set is dry, I'm going to go back in with some bright whites and let them dry again. And once they're dry again, I can add just layers of yellow, and that will basically just where the yellow lays over orange, it'll just make a brighter fiery orange, and where it lays over white will be a super bright hot white yellow. So now it's starting to look closer to finished, and again, just going from corner to corner and seeing what needs what, more detail, more blending, more whatever. And yeah, just this is finally where I stop hating whatever I'm working on, and finally I'm like, okay, it's not complete garbage. So let's just keep chipping away, cycling through, adding detail, and ending up with a finished painting. Conveniently enough, our light source is also our vanishing point, so these figures have their shadows aligned with our perspective lines that we made in the first place, so that helps bring that image together.